He said I was the one, but I was just his supply. I still remember the first time he cried in front of me. Real tears, or at least they looked real. He held my hands like they were the last thing anchoring him to life. "You're everything I never had," he said, voice trembling. And I, starved for affection, believed it. But it wasn't love. It was a trap. No one warns you that the most dangerous predator shows up with wet eyes and soft promises. At first, he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He said he'd never felt this way before, that I was special, different. He wrapped me in compliments, expensive gifts, and dreams of a future that never existed. He looked at me like I was sacred, until the door closed. Then came the coldness, the disdain, the silent treatment. He'd go days without speaking to me. "You know what you did." But I didn't. I apologized for things I didn't understand. That only gave him more control. I remember one evening in the kitchen, trying to talk about our weekend plans. He was glued to his phone, not even looking at me. When I asked if he was listening, he sighed. "You always ruin the mood." After that, 2 full days of silence. He slept turned away, ate without a word, walked through the house like I didn't exist. That wasn't a fight. It was punishment. Psychological abuse wrapped in routine. He was the cold, calculated narcissist, seducing with flattery, punishing with absence. And I was the victim, mistaking control for intensity. Narcissistic abuse doesn't always scream. Sometimes it starves you slowly. Every time he left me alone with guilt, he planted, I broke a little more, until I was apologizing for breathing. He used to say, "You're too sensitive." No one could deal with that, and I hated myself for feeling so much. At parties, I was his trophy. He loved to show me off, as long as I didn't outshine him. If I laughed too loud with someone, he'd shut down. If I wore something beautiful, he'd ask, "Who are you trying to impress?" His jealousy masked itself as care. The manipulation was coded in faux concern. It wasn't love, it was ownership. I wasn't a person. I was an extension of his ego. The worst humiliation happened at a lunch with his friends. I tried to tell a funny story. He cut me off with that venomous smile. "Don't listen to her. She exaggerates everything. Drama is her specialty." They laughed. I swallowed my tears with the food. On the drive home, he looked at me with disgust and said, "You always ruin it when you try to be the center." And I believed him. I started to think I was too much, too emotional, too wrong. But what I was a victim of emotional abuse, a toxic relationship built on manipulation, gaslighting, and invisible control. "You're the woman of my life," he'd whisper in between periods of rejection, silence, and subtle cruelty. But now I know, I wasn't his soulmate. I was his supply. I was the mirror he needed to see himself as something grand. I was never chosen. I was consumed, used, and when I started to run out, he vanished. He said he loved me, but dimmed me every time I started to shine. It wasn't love, it was hunger dressed as passion. Sometimes I still wake up afraid of the silence, as if he's still punishing me for something I never did. Sometimes I still find myself staring at the door, half expecting it to slam shut behind him. That sound used to mean I had done something wrong, even when I hadn't, especially when I hadn't. That was his favorite kind of control, the kind where I doubted myself so deeply that I ended up apologizing for things I didn't even understand. That's the thing about narcissistic abuse. It doesn't just wound you, it rewires you. You learn to anticipate disappointment, to shrink before the anger arrives, to beg for affection like it's a reward for being quiet enough. There was a night I can't forget. I had made his favorite dinner, chicken marsala, wine, candles lit. I wore the dress he once said made me look elegant, not too much. He walked in late, smelled like a bar, and didn't even look at the table. "Why are you trying so hard tonight? What did you do?" That question cut deeper than if he had yelled. In his world, love wasn't trust, it was control. If I gave too much, I must be hiding something. If I was too happy, I must be cheating. His mind poisoned mine, until nothing I did felt pure. That's what people don't understand about emotional abuse. It's not always loud. It's the smirks during your happiest moments, the delays in replying when you're anxious, the compliments laced with comparison. One day he said, "You're pretty when you don't talk so much." I laughed, but that night I caught myself speaking less, and he noticed. "See, we're finally getting along," and I mistook that for progress. In public, he was charming, attentive, magnetic. Everyone loved him. They called me lucky. I felt lucky too, until we got in the car. That was where the real him lived. Cold, detached, passive-aggressive. I once told him I felt distant from him, and he smiled without warmth. Maybe you're just emotionally needy. I never signed up to be your therapist. I looked out the window, pretending I wasn't crumbling inside. That was gaslighting, making me question my needs, my sanity, my worth. I began to notice the pattern. Every time I expressed pain, he punished me with distance. The silent treatment wasn't a phase. It was a weapon. 3 days, once, without a single word. I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. I texted him, begged him to just tell me what I'd done. No reply. But the moment I pretended to be fine, he returned, with flowers, with sex, with a smile that felt like a hook in my ribs. It took me too long to realize what was happening. I had become a mirror, not a partner. My job was to reflect back the version of him he wanted to see, the brilliant, desirable, sensitive man who loved too much. He wasn't loving. He was feeding, and I was the supply, the emotional fuel, the one who absorbed his rage, his boredom, his need to feel superior. I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a performance, and he was both the director and the critic. I remember the last straw, a work event. I had just been promoted, and my boss introduced me as a brilliant and rising leader. I was glowing, proud, alive. That night in the car, he said nothing. When I asked if he was proud of me, he turned to me and said, "It's cute how excited you get over crumbs. Let me know when it's something real." My throat closed. The tears came before I could stop them, and he smiled, that cruel, quiet smile. "See? You're always so emotional. This is why no one takes you seriously." That's when something cracked in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even grief. It was the cold clarity of a woman who realizes she's been living in a cage built from compliments and confusion. I stopped begging that night, stopped explaining, and slowly, I started planning my exit. Narcissists don't cope well with losing their supply, especially when she stops reacting. But I was done being a mirror. I wanted to be a person again. I never got closure. He never apologized. Never admitted to the abuse, the manipulation, the way he twisted love into a leash. Of course he didn't. He never saw me as a victim. In his eyes, I was the ungrateful one, the overreactor, the one who couldn't handle a real man. You made me feel crazy for asking for basic kindness. You called me your world, but only when I was breaking myself to orbit around you. Even now, there are days I question what was real. That's the legacy of psychological abuse. It haunts you in silence. Long after he's gone, the trauma whispers, "Maybe it was your fault. Maybe you were too much." But then I remember the truth. He never loved me. He loved what I gave him. And when I stopped giving, he stopped looking. Some mornings, I still hear his voice in my head. Not the one that seduced me, but the one that chipped away at me. That quiet, condescending tone. The one that asked, "Are you really going to wear that?" The one that said, "I don't know how anyone puts up with you." The one that laughed when I cried. That's what narcissistic abuse does. It buries itself in your nervous system. Even in peace, you flinch. After I left, I expected to feel free. I thought the silence would be peaceful, but I had learned to live in a constant state of anticipation, waiting for the next cold look, the next punishment, the next emotional withdrawal. And when it didn't come, I felt lost. That's the most twisted part of a toxic relationship. The pain becomes your normal. When it's gone, you almost miss it, because at least pain meant he was paying attention. I couldn't even trust my own memories. I would scroll through photos of us, smiling, laughing, touching, and wonder if it was all fake, or if I was the problem. He had spent so long gaslighting me that even the truth felt unreliable. I kept replaying conversations in my head. Was I too sensitive? Was I hard to love? Was he right? But then the flashbacks came. Not the good moments, the real ones. The day he accused me of flirting with a waiter because I smiled too much. The time he made a cruel joke about my childhood in front of my friends. The night I found his messages to another woman, and he somehow made me feel guilty for checking. He always had a way of twisting reality until I was the villain in every story. That's the art of a narcissist. Manipulation so precise you don't even realize you're bleeding. And the worst part? No one saw it. To the outside world, he was generous, witty, charming. They told me how lucky I was, how kind he seemed. If I ever tried to hint at the truth, I was met with doubt. He's just intense. He clearly loves you. Relationships take work, so I stayed. Longer than I should have. Because when the world gaslights you too, it's easier to believe the lie than to fight for your reality alone. He used to say, "No one will ever love you like I do." And he was right. No one ever will. Because that wasn't love. It was control. It was feeding off my loyalty, my empathy, my silence. I was a good listener, a good forgiver, a good liar to myself. That's why I was perfect for him. That's why he chose me. But I'm done being chosen by people who only love the parts of me that don't threaten them. He's with someone new now. Of course he is. Narcissists don't grieve. They replace. She's probably hearing all the same lines. You're not like the others. I've never felt this way before. He'll make her feel like a queen, until she stops clapping. And then he'll do to her what he did to me. Withdraw, punish, destroy. Because he doesn't want a partner. He wants a supply. And me? I'm rebuilding. It's messy. It's lonely. Healing from emotional abuse is like detoxing from a drug you didn't know you were addicted to. But I'm learning to love the quiet, the real kind, not the kind used to torture. I'm learning that my tears aren't weaknesses. My needs aren't burdens. My feelings aren't flaws. He told me I was too much. But the truth is, he was never enough. I wasn't hard to love. He was incapable of loving anything he couldn't control. Losing him wasn't the heartbreak. Loving him was. And yet sometimes in the middle of the night, I still dream he walks in the door, smiling like nothing ever happened. And I wake up grateful that it was just a nightmare. I used to think closure came in conversations, that if he could just say sorry, if he could just admit it, I'd finally be able to breathe. But narcissists don't offer closure. They offer silence, confusion, and sometimes a final act of cruelty, just to remind you they're still the ones in control. Abuse for them isn't just a pattern, it's power. And walking away means ripping that power from their hands. After I left, he didn't chase me. Not really. There were a few texts, carefully timed, cold, empty. I hope you find peace. I guess you never loved me after all. Messages designed not to bring me back, but to remind me that he was still the victim. That's the final act of emotional manipulation, rewriting the story, making you question your own escape. For weeks, I stared at those texts. I drafted replies I never sent. Part of me wanted to scream the truth, to line up every wound and say, "Look, this is what you did." But I didn't, because what would be the point? He never listened when I whispered in pain. He wouldn't hear me now that I was screaming in rage. One night, I saw a photo of him online with her, the new one. Same smile, same eyes, same pose he used to make with me. And I felt sick, not because I missed him, but because I recognized the pattern starting all over again. He looked happy. They always do in the beginning. That's how the cycle works. Idealize, devalue, discard, and then I wasn't
repeat.
Special to him. I was a mirror. And when that mirror cracked, he found a new one. That's the devastating truth of being in a relationship with a narcissist. Your entire identity gets reduced to how well you reflect them. The moment you stop playing the role, you become disposable. He didn't love me. He loved what I gave him access to. My softness, my strength, my ability to break and still stay. But I'm not staying anymore. Healing hasn't been beautiful. It's been raw, lonely. There were nights I questioned myself all over again. Nights I still felt his voice in my ear, criticizing my laugh, my words, my body, my heart. That's what trauma does. It lingers. It echoes. It clings to your skin like smoke you can't wash off. But every day, the volume lowers. I no longer flinch when my phone buzzes. I no longer wait for someone to punish me with silence. I no longer tiptoe around my own needs. These are small victories, but they matter. Because surviving psychological abuse isn't about becoming fearless. It's about learning to trust yourself again, piece by trembling piece. There's no revenge in healing, no moment where they finally feel what they made you feel. They don't. Narcissists don't feel remorse. They feel abandonment. They don't regret the pain they caused. They regret losing access to the power they had over you. And when they see you rising, smiling, breathing without them, that's the only closure you'll ever get. He didn't break me. He hollowed me, and I filled the empty spaces with my own strength. I walked through hell thinking it was love. Now I know better. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if he ever loved me, even a little. But then I remember, someone who loves you doesn't destroy you just to feel alive. There was a time I would have done anything to make him stay. Changed my hair, my voice, the way I laughed. I became an expert at self-erasure, shrinking, softening, silencing, just to avoid another shutdown, another cold shoulder, another week of being treated like a stranger in my own home. That wasn't love. That was survival inside a toxic relationship. And I didn't even realize I was drowning until I was out of air. He used to say, "You're the only one who gets me." And I wore that like a crown. But it was a curse. Because being the only one who understood him meant I was the only one he could blame, control, punish. He trained me to be the keeper of his chaos. And when I failed to fix it, which I always did, because it was never mine to fix, he'd retreat into silence, into emotional neglect, into rage disguised as withdrawal. There was one night I'll never forget. I had spent hours cooking, lighting candles, trying to reconnect after yet another week of distance. He walked in, glanced at the table, and said, "Why are you acting like we're fine?" I felt the blood leave my face. "I'm trying," I whispered. He poured himself a drink, didn't sit down, didn't look at me. "Try less." Then he left. That was abuse, not love. That was punishment for wanting closeness. That was control wrapped in coldness. You don't forget moments like that. You bury them, until your body starts remembering them for you. In panic attacks, in stomach aches, in that deep, paralyzing fear that you're always one wrong word away from abandonment. He told me he hated drama, but he created it. Subtle, constant chaos. Texts left on read. Sudden mood swings. Strange absences. Little lies I could never prove. Then, when I finally reacted, when I cried or asked a question or broke down from exhaustion, he'd say, "This is exactly what I mean. You're impossible to talk to." That's gaslighting. That's psychological abuse. That's how narcissists rewrite reality, by slowly convincing you that your pain is the problem. The worst part is how long it takes to recognize it. I thought I was in love. I thought he was just complicated. I told myself he had a hard childhood, that he was stressed, that he loved me, just didn't know how to show it. But narcissists don't struggle to love. They struggle to see anyone but themselves. I was never his partner. I was a stage. And when I stopped playing my part, he found a new actress. Now, people ask me why I stayed. It's always the question. But no one asks what it costs to leave. Leaving a narcissist feels like pulling yourself out of quicksand. Every step forward hurts. You second-guess your memories. You grieve the dream more than the person. You ache for the version of them that never existed. And worst of all, you miss the highs. The rare moments when they made you feel like the most loved person in the world. Because narcissists know how to give just enough to keep you hooked. But that wasn't love. That was the leash. I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was. And that woman, the one who begged, who waited, who believed him, she's the one I mourn now. Because she didn't know. She didn't see the trap until the door slammed shut. He convinced me I was hard to love. But he just couldn't love anyone he couldn't control. He broke me in quiet ways, with silence louder than any scream. I've learned to live without his voice, but mine is still coming back slowly, word by word, breath by breath. And when it's finally full again, I won't waste it whispering apologies to men who never deserved my softness. Some days I still catch myself apologizing out loud, to no one. I'll drop something, make a mistake, take too long deciding between two shirts, and suddenly, "I'm sorry," slips out of my mouth like a reflex. That's what emotional abuse does. It rewires you to believe that everything is your fault, that your mere existence is a disruption, a burden. He trained me well. A twitch of his mouth, a sigh, a long silence. That was all it took. I'd immediately scan myself. What did I do wrong? What mood is he in? Is it safe to speak right now? I thought I was being loving, careful, respectful, but I was just constantly managing his emotions while completely neglecting mine. That's not love. That's surviving a narcissist. And what makes it so insidious is how slowly it happens. He didn't come into my life screaming or slamming doors. He came in gentle, curious, charismatic. He listened, deeply, made me feel seen, chosen, special. That's how he hooked me. Every narcissist does this. They mirror you, reflect back all your light, so you'll drop your guard. I mistook that mimicry for connection, for intimacy, but it wasn't real. He never wanted me. He wanted what I represented, a source, a supply, someone to worship him, soothe him, feed his endless need to feel superior. And the moment I stopped being useful, I became disposable. One day, I found a message on his phone. It was short, flirty, meaningless. But the worst part wasn't that he was talking to someone else. It was the way he reacted when I confronted him. Cold, flat, dismissive. "You're so insecure," he said, like I was the problem. I remember standing there, shaking, phone still in my hand, waiting for some kind of apology, some flicker of remorse. But there was none, just gaslighting. "I can't even talk to people without you getting paranoid." He could lie so easily, effortlessly, and if I cried, he'd mock me. "This again?" He'd mutter, like my heartbreak was boring, like my pain was an inconvenience. I didn't know it at the time, but this was abuse. The subtle kind. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, just self-doubt, just a hollow space where your confidence used to live. When I started pulling away, quietly, gently, the way I'd learned to do everything, he noticed. Narcissists always do. They sense when their control is slipping, and that's when he turned on the charm again. "I miss us. You're the only one who really gets me. I don't know who I am without you." And for a moment, I faltered. Because victims of narcissistic abuse don't want power. We want peace. We want the love we were promised. We want the person from the beginning to come back. But the beginning was the mask, and the mask was a lie. I wish I could say I left all at once, that I woke up and walked away. But it happened slowly, in pieces, like pulling glass from your skin, one shard at a time. Some days I missed him. Other days I missed myself. But I kept going, quietly, secretly, until the space between us became real, permanent. He never said goodbye. Of course he didn't. Narcissists don't offer closure. They leave you with questions, with echoes, with trauma. He didn't leave me empty. He left me full of wounds I had to name myself. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was remembering who I was before he found me. I'm still healing. Some nights, I still dream about him, not the real him, the one he pretended to be. And I wake up with that ache in my chest, the kind that makes you wonder if any of it was ever real. But then I look around. There's no silence punishing me, no mood I have to decode, no man making me feel like I'm too much or not enough. Just me, breathing, healing, becoming. And that is real. That is mine. He doesn't get to take that too. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing he was never really there. Everything I loved was a performance. Every "I love you" was a script. Every tear, a tool. I was in love with a version of him that only existed to keep me tethered. And when I stopped playing my part, when I stopped begging, explaining, apologizing, the mask dropped. And I saw it. The emptiness behind the charm. The hunger behind the love. The truth I never wanted to face. He never loved me. He fed on me. That's what narcissistic abuse is. A slow erosion of identity, of boundaries, of joy. And when you finally escape, you don't feel free. You feel numb, lost, like your heart doesn't know how to beat for you anymore. But little by little, mine is learning. Now, when I speak, I don't flinch. When I cry, I don't hide. When someone loves me gently, I don't question it. That's the gift of surviving a toxic relationship. You learn the difference between attention and affection, control and care, possession and partnership. I was never too much. I was just with someone who needed me small. He didn't break me in half. He broke me into silence. I gave him everything, and he taught me that was the mistake. Some wounds don't close. Some ghosts don't leave. But I do, and I'm not looking back.